Mr. Dold for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate it, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to come, and I also want to apologize to those that are here. It's a little warm as well, so appreciate that, but I am delighted to know that it is getting picked up, and hopefully many others will have the opportunity to see what we're talking about here today, because it is very important. A couple of things that I wanted to go over, and really the line of questioning I'm going to focus on is going to be on the refinance program. And I know that Secretary Marquez, you had talked about earlier in your opening statement that funds have been well managed. And certainly I would like to go into a little bit about the refinance in terms of the resources that have been spent on it versus the number of refinances that have actually happened. So would you say that with regard to the FHA Refinance Program that the funds have been well managed?
Well, on that I would have to defer to my colleague, Dave Stevens, the FHA Commissioner.
Okay.
I run the MSP program.
I understand, but I'm just saying we're talking about several programs, and I'll direct it over to the Secretary in a second, but so you're not really familiar with that specific?
That is not my portfolio.
I will then go over to Secretary Stevens. Can you tell me if you believe those funds have been well managed?
Yes, no funds have been spent, Congressman. The funds are there for covering potential losses in the event of ultimate default, and no money has been spent out of those monies at this point.
So is the information that I'm receiving with regard to, I've been told that we have, through TARP, approximately $50 billion has been dispersed. Is that incorrect, out of the $8+ billion?
That's incorrect. Not all of that was for the FHA short refinance program, but just if I could clarify, because I think it's an important question. The program, FHA short refi, is part of kind of a mosaic of offerings that have been created by the administration, and this was created later in the process to deal primarily with negative equity. If you think about HAMP, for example, HAMP was an early creation to deal with borrowers who had been put in subprime loans and alternative products that they never should have been put in the first place, and that was meant to modify their payments downward. As the recession moved forward over the last couple of years, those problems transgressed into areas that were specifically related to negative equity and unemployment. The short refi program, which was only actually implemented in the late fall of last year, is still being operationalized by a number of institutions to get it into the market. In fact, this week alone, it's been reported that Wells Fargo, GMAC Ally, Citi, other major institutions have stated publicly that they are just in the process of implementing, at minimum, pilots to roll out the short refinance program. The monies that were allocated were designed to protect the fund going out past 2020 in the event of losses that might be incurred from FHA short refis that would be originated to protect the taxpayer, to protect the fund itself from being at risk. So at this point, no funds have been expended whatsoever.
If I can, do you have a response to that in terms of funds from TARP that have been allocated?
Yes, I mean there's been an obligation of a significant obligation towards the short refi program, but because there have been only a small handful of actual refinances, none of which have defaulted yet. There's been no real expenditure of money. The expenditure will occur if the program is successful, and if there are refinances and then there's problems with those refinances, that's when the TARP money kicks in, either as a guarantee on one end for failures where TARP has the first loss position, and then secondly, there's another additional $2.5 billion that's allocated to help extinguish or modify second liens associated with this program. But to date, nothing has really happened from the TARP perspective on the short refi program.
How long has the program been operational?
Again, Congressman, the program was a later addition to deal with the economy. It was fully rolled out in November of last year.
And how many?
And institutions were able to offer it from from November. And just to be clear, each of these institutions had to evaluate their portfolios. It was optional for investors to decide whether to write down. They had to create systems, and we're just seeing those institutions begin to operationalize this now as we speak.
And I appreciate that. And
yeah.
One of the things that at least that we're hearing this, and we've got $50 million that has at least been put into the initial kitty. We've got under 40 loans thus far since September 2010, which may have been its inception, but maybe fully rolled out in November. Still, we've seen 39. We got $50 million allocated if it goes well. And we've got, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, a little bit over $8 billion is what's totally allocated in there?
Well, yes. For this particular program, it's really almost a total of $10 billion of TARP funds that are allocated. The additional funds that you're referring to from that are dedicated to other TARP modification programs like the HAMP program, like the Hardest-Hit program.
And since my time is really running out, just one last question. So homeowners can't participate unless the senior lender will reduce their principal by at least 10%.
That's correct.
Is that correct? So principal lenders on performing loans will have to agree to reduce the principal by 10% in the private sector.
Yes.
Do you anticipate that there's going to be many that are going to flee to this program? That this is going to be a good idea?
We were always very clear from the beginning to understate the numbers. And while it started off slow, I will tell you that in the first few months, we have 245 applications in process. It exceeds what Hope for Homeowners did in 3 years. By no means are we touting success, but these are complex programs to implement. If you read any of the news this week, 3 major national institutions announced that they're going to be doing pilots with the short refinance program. I do not expect large numbers, and I think that's an absolute concern because it is voluntary on the part of these servicers to participate with the investors that hold those mortgages.
Recognizing that my time is expired, I would like, out of the 240 that you've got in process, how many do you anticipate will actually make it through?
240 loans is a very low number, and I can't estimate exactly what would go through. I will tell you this, that of the loans that have been financed already, the average write-down was $77,000. The average loan-to-value is 90%, and the average FICO score is 711. So these are, I actually anticipate if the sample were to keep like that, and as institutions implement the program, they will be seeing significant write-downs, and these loans will be very sustainable, exceeding what we expected from a risk factor, which would mean that the TARP allocation would be underutilized in that process. But it is very early in this stage to be evaluating the program since it was just literally implemented over the past few months.